What if I told you a single company holds the strings to the global economy? Not through outright ownership, but through a web of influence so vast, so deeply woven, it dictates the fate of nations, industries, and your very livelihood. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's the reality of BlackRock. This financial behemoth, shrouded in secrecy, controls more assets than most countries could ever dream of. A staggering $10.6 trillion. That's your bank, your retirement fund, even the coffee you buy this morning. All touched by a company you've probably never even heard of. BlackRock doesn't operate in the open like Apple or Amazon. No, they lurk in the shadows, their power hidden behind complex financial instruments and a carefully crafted image of passive investment. But don't let that fool you. This is a company that whispers in the ears of CEOs, dictates government policy, and shapes the very fabric of our economic reality. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to unravel the truth behind BlackRock, expose the conspiracies they don't want you to know, and by the end, you'll understand the true extent of their power. This isn't just about numbers on a screen, it's about your life, your future, and the future of generations to come. BlackRock's influence stretches far beyond Wall Street, impacting everything from climate change to social justice. They've mastered the art of pulling strings from the shadows, but we're shining a light on their game. We'll expose how their passive investing strategy gives them unprecedented control over the world's largest corporations. We'll delve into their political maneuvering, uncovering the cozy relationship between BlackRock and the very governments tasked with regulating them. And we'll reveal the human cost of their relentless pursuit of profit, a cost borne by everyday people like you and me. Stick around, because what you're about to learn will shock you. This is information they don't want you to have, but knowledge is power. And by the end of this video, you'll be armed with the truth about BlackRock, the puppet master of the global economy. Imagine a mountain of money so vast, so colossal, that it dwarfs the economies of entire nations. We're not talking millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars. That, my friends, is the scale of BlackRock's wealth. $10.6 trillion to be exact, a figure so astronomical it's difficult to even comprehend. That's more money than the entire GDP of China, the world's second largest economy. Now, BlackRock will tell you they don't actually own this money, that they're simply caretakers, managing it on behalf of others. And technically, that's true. They gather investments from pension funds, insurance companies, and wealthy individuals, pooling it together into massive funds. But don't let that technicality fool you. This colossal concentration of capital gives BlackRock unparalleled influence over the global economy. Think about it. When you deposit money in a bank, you're essentially lending it to them, giving them the power to invest it and influence the economy. Now magnify that by trillions of dollars, and you begin to grasp the sheer magnitude of BlackRock's reach. Now, you might be wondering how one company amassed such staggering power. The answer, my friends, lies in the seemingly innocuous world of index funds. These financial instruments, pioneered by BlackRock, have revolutionized investing, making it easier than ever for ordinary people to put their money in the market. But behind this facade of democratization lies a calculated strategy for accumulating influence. Here's how it works. An index fund, like BlackRock's flagship S&P 500 index fund, simply tracks a specific market index, in this case, the S&P 500, which comprises 500 of the largest publicly traded U.S. companies. Instead of trying to pick individual winning stocks, investors buy into the entire index, effectively owning a tiny slice of each company. It's a simple, low-cost way to diversify your portfolio and ride the overall market wave. Sounds harmless enough, right? But here's the catch. As more and more investors pile into index funds, BlackRock's ownership stake in these companies grows proportionally. Remember, they're not just managing a few million here and there. We're talking trillions of dollars flowing into these index funds. Now imagine you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You're sitting in a board meeting discussing a major decision. Maybe it's a new product launch, a merger, or a factory closure. As you look around the table, you see the familiar faces of your fellow board members. But there's one presence in the room that carries more weight than all the others combined: BlackRock. They may not always have a seat at the table, but their influence is omnipresent. As the largest shareholder in countless corporations, BlackRock's vote carries significant weight. And while they claim to be passive investors, their size and influence give them enormous leverage over corporate decision-making. Need a loan to finance that new factory? BlackRock can make it happen. Want to acquire a competitor and consolidate your market share? BlackRock can smooth the way. But here's the rub. BlackRock's primary fiduciary responsibility is to its investors, not to the companies they invest in, nor to the workers those companies employ. So, what happens when a company's largest shareholder prioritizes profit above all else? You get a race to the bottom, a relentless pursuit of short-term gains at the expense of long-term sustainability, worker well-being, and societal good. Companies are pressured to cut costs, squeeze their workforce, and prioritize shareholder returns above all else. And who benefits most from this corporate greed? The wealthy investors, of course, the same ones who entrust their trillions to BlackRock's care. It's a self-perpetuating cycle of wealth concentration, where the rich get richer and everyone else is left fighting over the scraps. This, my friends, is the true face of BlackRock's power. It's not about shadowy conspiracies or evil masterminds. It's about a system rigged to benefit those at the very top. A system where a single company can hold the fate of the global economy in its hands, while the rest of us are left to navigate the consequences. BlackRock's rise to power is a masterclass in subtle persuasion. They've convinced millions to willingly hand over their financial futures with the siren song of passive investing. It sounds almost boring, right? And that's the genius of it. By framing their strategy as a hands-off approach, they've lulled the public and regulators into a false sense of security. "Don't worry," they whisper, "we're not picking winners and losers like those risky hedge funds. We simply follow the market, ensuring steady, reliable returns for everyone." They dangle the promise of financial security, cleverly disguised as a safe and predictable path to wealth. And who wouldn't be tempted, especially in a world increasingly defined by economic uncertainty? But this simplicity is deceptive. It masks a far more complex and calculated game, one where BlackRock's influence extends far beyond simply mirroring the market. They've become masters at exploiting the very system they claim to passively observe. Remember those trillions of dollars pouring into their index funds? Those aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're a weapon, carefully aimed at bending the global economy to their will. While day traders frantically buy and sell, chasing quick profits, BlackRock plays a different game, a long game. They understand that true power lies not in short-term gains, but in patient, strategic accumulation. Think of them as a chess grandmaster, carefully maneuvering their pieces, anticipating their opponent's moves, always several steps ahead. Their strategy is deceptively simple: buy and hold. They acquire significant stakes in companies across all sectors, not with the intention of quickly flipping them for profit, but to establish a dominant, unshakable presence. They're not interested in micromanaging these companies day to day. They're playing the long game, gradually shifting the balance of power in their favor. This long-term approach gives them a level of influence that goes far beyond their voting rights. CEOs know that BlackRock is here to stay, and they're acutely aware of the consequences of crossing a shareholder with such deep pockets and unwavering patience. It's a subtle but powerful form of coercion, one that shapes corporate decision-making at its core. Let's be clear. There's nothing inherently passive about BlackRock's approach. They've crafted a narrative that benefits them, downplaying their influence while reaping the rewards of their strategic positioning. They'll tell you they're simply following the market, that their index funds are a reflection of the collective wisdom of investors. But when you control trillions of dollars, you don't just follow the market. You influence its very direction. Every investment decision BlackRock makes sends ripples throughout the global economy. Companies rise and fall based on their whims. Industries are reshaped by their capital flows, and governments are forced to take notice of their preferences. This is not to say that BlackRock is inherently malicious or that every decision they make is detrimental, but their immense power demands scrutiny. We can't afford to blindly accept their self-proclaimed passivity. The stakes are simply too high. Here's the uncomfortable truth. BlackRock didn't create this system. They're simply masters at exploiting it. They've figured out how to navigate the loopholes, leverage the regulations, and capitalize on the inherent flaws of our current economic model. And they've done it all in plain sight, hiding in plain sight, cloaked in the legitimacy of passive investing. But as their power grows, so too does the urgency to understand the true extent of their influence. We need to ask ourselves, who benefits most from this system? Is it the everyday investors who entrust their savings to BlackRock? Or is it the select few who sit atop this financial pyramid, reaping the rewards of a system rigged in their favor? The answers to these questions are complex and uncomfortable, but they are questions we can no longer afford to ignore. The future of our economy, our democracy, and our planet itself may very well hinge on our ability to understand and address the unprecedented power of BlackRock. Behind BlackRock's trillion-dollar empire stands an army of investors, millions strong. These are the pensioners, the teachers, the everyday folks who trust BlackRock with their hard-earned savings. They believe they're investing in their future, securing a comfortable retirement, maybe even leaving a little something behind for their children. And in a way, they are. But what they don't realize is that their money is being used to wield power on a scale they can scarcely imagine. You see, when you invest in a BlackRock index fund, you're not just buying a piece of the market, you're handing over your voting rights. Every share you own translates into a vote in the companies BlackRock invests in. But here's the catch. Those votes aren't cast by you, the individual investor. They're cast by BlackRock, acting on your behalf. Now you might think, well, as long as they're voting in my best interest, what's the problem? But here's the rub. BlackRock's definition of best interest often aligns more closely with maximizing shareholder value than with the values of their individual investors. They're legally obligated to prioritize profit, even if it comes at the expense of workers' rights, environmental sustainability, or social justice. Imagine a shareholder meeting at a major corporation. The CEO is delivering a polished presentation, touting record profits and a bright future. But behind the scenes, things aren't so rosy. Workers are being squeezed, wages are stagnant, and the company is cutting corners on environmental regulations. Now imagine you're a shareholder in this company, and you have a chance to vote on proposals that could address these issues. You could vote to raise wages, improve working conditions, or invest in sustainable practices. But here's the problem. You're not the one casting the vote. BlackRock is. And more often than not, they'll side with management, voting in favor of the status quo, even if it means perpetuating a system that benefits the few at the expense of the many. Why? Because BlackRock's primary allegiance is to its bottom line, to maximizing returns for its investors, even if those returns come at a social or environmental cost. They're playing a game of financial chess, and in their calculations, sacrificing a few pawns for the sake of the queen is a perfectly acceptable strategy. We've been taught that the stock market is a democratic system, where every dollar represents a vote, and the collective wisdom of investors determines the fate of corporations. But the reality is far more insidious. The rise of BlackRock and other asset management giants has concentrated voting power in the hands of a select few, creating a system of corporate governance that is anything but democratic. These firms, with their trillions of dollars under management, have become the de facto kingmakers of the corporate world. They have the power to install or oust CEOs, approve or reject mergers, and dictate the strategic direction of entire industries. And they wield this power not through some nefarious conspiracy, but through the seemingly innocuous act of casting votes on behalf of millions of passive investors. This concentration of power has profound implications for our economy and our society. It allows a handful of unelected individuals to shape the global landscape, often prioritizing short-term profits over long-term sustainability, shareholder value over stakeholder well-being. The most disconcerting aspect of BlackRock's power is how quietly it's amassed. They've managed to accumulate unprecedented influence while remaining largely invisible to the public eye. Their name doesn't adorn flashy skyscrapers or the latest gadgets. They operate in the shadows, their power amplified by a system that rewards secrecy and obfuscation. And this lack of transparency comes at a cost. It allows BlackRock to operate with a level of impunity that would be unthinkable for a company of its size and influence in any other industry. It allows them to shape the world in their image, often without any meaningful accountability or oversight. But here's the good news. BlackRock's power is not absolute. It relies on our continued acquiescence, our willingness to remain passive observers in a game rigged against us. But by shining a light on their practices, by demanding greater transparency and accountability, we can begin to reclaim our power and build a more just and equitable economic system. Remember that mountain of money we talked about earlier? The $10.6 trillion behemoth controlled by BlackRock? Now picture this. That mountain casts a long, dark shadow. And in that shadow, a different story unfolds. A story of widening inequality, stagnant wages, and a shrinking middle class. It's the story of two Americas, two worlds existing side by side, yet separated by a chasm of wealth and opportunity. On one side, we see the beneficiaries of BlackRock's success, the wealthy elite, the top 1%, whose fortunes have skyrocketed alongside the company's own meteoric rise. Their world is one of lavish lifestyles, exclusive access, and a political system that caters to their every whim. On the other side, we see the millions of Americans who are struggling to make ends meet, who are working longer hours for less pay, who are drowning in debt and facing an uncertain future. These are the people who are bearing the brunt of BlackRock's relentless pursuit of profit, the ones who are paying the price for a system rigged in favor of the few. How is it, you might ask, that a company entrusted with managing the savings of millions can simultaneously contribute to the economic hardship of so many? The answer lies in the very structure of our current economic system, a system that prioritizes shareholder value above all else. BlackRock, like all publicly traded companies, is legally obligated to maximize returns for its shareholders. This means that every decision they make, every vote they cast, every investment they pursue is ultimately driven by a single-minded focus on profit. But what about the other stakeholders in this equation? The workers, the consumers, the communities that are impacted by corporate decisions. Their interests are often relegated to the sidelines, sacrificed on the altar of shareholder returns. The consequences of this relentless pursuit of profit are all around us. We see it in the widening gap between the rich and the poor, in the shrinking middle class, in the growing number of Americans who are struggling to afford basic necessities like healthcare, housing, and education. We see it in the decline of unions, the erosion of worker protections, and the rise of precarious employment. And we see it in the increasing concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a select few, while the rest of us are left to fight over the scraps. This is not just a moral issue, it's an economic one. When so much wealth is concentrated in the hands of so few, it stifles economic growth, undermines democracy, and erodes social cohesion. The story of BlackRock is not just about one company, it's about a system that is failing to serve the needs of the many. It's a system that has allowed a handful of powerful institutions to amass unprecedented wealth and influence, often at the expense of the very people they are supposed to serve. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can choose to build a different kind of economy, one that values people over profits, sustainability over short-term gains, and shared prosperity over the enrichment of the few. This begins by demanding greater transparency and accountability from institutions like BlackRock. It means holding our elected officials responsible for creating a more just and equitable economic system. And it means recognizing that we, the people, have the power to shape a different future, one where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. We've all heard the phrase, too big to fail. But what about too connected to control? BlackRock's influence extends far beyond the boardrooms of Wall Street. It reaches deep into the halls of power, blurring the lines between corporate interests and government policy. It's a cozy relationship, one built on a foundation of shared interests and a revolving door that spins effortlessly between Washington, D.C. and Wall Street. Former government officials, lured by lucrative salaries and the promise of power, flock to BlackRock, bringing with them their insider knowledge and connections. And when the time comes for BlackRock to make its voice heard in the halls of Congress or the White House, these former officials are there to answer the call, lobbying for policies that benefit their new employer, often at the expense of the very people they once swore to serve. BlackRock understands that true power lies not just in controlling assets, but in shaping the very rules of the game. And they've become masters at playing the Washington, D.C. influence game, using their vast resources to shape legislation, influence regulators, and ensure that the system continues to work in their favor. They donate generously to political campaigns, both Democrats and Republicans, ensuring access to policymakers and a voice in shaping the legislative agenda. They fund think tanks and research institutions, producing studies and reports that support their policy positions. And they deploy their army of lobbyists to swarm Capitol Hill, whispering in the ears of lawmakers, crafting legislation behind closed doors, and ensuring that their interests are always represented at the highest levels of government. You might think that a company with BlackRock's power and influence would be subject to intense scrutiny from regulators, that safeguards would be in place to prevent abuses and protect the public interest. But you'd be wrong. BlackRock has proven remarkably adept at navigating the regulatory landscape, exploiting loopholes, securing exemptions, and leveraging its political clout to ward off meaningful oversight. They've successfully argued that their size and influence are not a threat to the financial system, that their passive investing strategy exempts them from the kind of regulations imposed on other financial institutions. And for the most part, regulators have bought their arguments, lulled into a false sense of security by BlackRock's carefully cultivated image as a responsible steward of capital. But the tide may be turning. As BlackRock's power and influence have grown, so too has public awareness of the company and its far-reaching impact on our lives. People are beginning to ask questions, to connect the dots between BlackRock's dominance and the economic challenges facing our communities. They're questioning the wisdom of entrusting so much power to a single company, a company that operates with a level of secrecy and impunity that would be unthinkable in any other industry. This growing awareness is fueling a movement for change, a movement demanding greater transparency, accountability, and a more equitable economic system. It's a movement that recognizes the urgent need to rein in the power of financial giants like BlackRock and create a system that works for everyone, not just the wealthy few. Let's rewind to the beginning. Remember that unsettling question we posed? What if I told you a single company held the strings to the global economy? We've journeyed deep into the heart of BlackRock, exploring the labyrinthine corridors of its power and influence. We've seen how their vast wealth, coupled with their mastery of passive investing and political maneuvering, has granted them an almost mythical level of control. This isn't about demonizing a single company or painting them as an evil empire. BlackRock is a symptom, a particularly powerful manifestation of a system that has become increasingly tilted in favor of the wealthy and powerful. They've played the game masterfully, exploiting the rules to their advantage and accruing an almost unimaginable level of influence in the process. But we, the everyday investors, the citizens, the workers whose lives are impacted by their decisions, we've allowed this to happen. We've entrusted our savings, our futures, to a system that prioritizes short-term profits over long-term sustainability, shareholder value over stakeholder well-being. The good news is, it's not too late to change course. BlackRock's power, while formidable, is not absolute. It relies on our continued participation in a system that often works against our best interests. But by understanding the nature of their influence, by shining a light on their practices, we can begin to reclaim our power and build a more just and equitable economic system. This starts with education. Share this video. Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues. The more people understand the forces at play, the more likely we are to demand change. Hold our elected officials accountable for creating a system that benefits everyone, not just the wealthy few. Support organizations fighting for greater transparency and accountability in the financial sector. And most importantly, never underestimate the power of your own voice. The future is not preordained. It's shaped by the choices we make today. Let's choose to build a world where power is more evenly distributed, where corporations are held accountable for their actions, and where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more eye-opening content.